Now, controls in Brawlhalla are interesting because really there's three main options that you're going to be seeing people use. Those would be controller, mouse and keyboard, and keyboard. And personally, I use keyboard just alone. But with that being said, that doesn't necessarily make it the best option. I think a lot of people are under the assumption that keyboard is just flat out the best thing you can use. And albeit I think keyboards like the Apex Pro TKL, which is what I have, there's software that you can use with the program, the SteelSeries GG app, which you can basically make the actuation of the key more responsive. So there's like less delay between the time you press the key and when it actually registers the input, which can be extremely helpful. But before we get into my specific controls, there's a couple settings you're going to want to focus in on. I think the very first thing you should automatically take off is the pickup with quick attack. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and when you get to a high level, or if you're trying to do a lot of like unarmed into I guess weapon pickup hits, it doesn't really work well, because when you go to do the light attack with unarmed, you're just going to end up picking up with the quick attack, and instead of getting like an unarmed D-light into, you know, weapon pickup, then do a sig, which isn't very good. Players like Lil Capt in the past have seen insane success with still having this feature enabled, but even now, you know, Capt is retired from the game, or so he says, and he also has this feature disabled, I'm pretty sure. I would have to say the next feature that I personally remove, some of you might like this, but I kind of consider it to be more of a noob-friendly option, which isn't a bad thing. Sometimes those sorts of features can stay throughout your whole time playing Brawlhalla, even at the highest level. But for me personally, disabling this feature is good, because say I thought I had another jump left, right? I didn't count my options right, and I went to press jump. Well, if I normally didn't have this feature enabled like I do here, then what would happen is I'd be like, oh, okay, I don't have any jumps left, so let me press my recovery key. But for whatever reason, if I didn't keep track of it and I press this while this option is enabled, my recovery would come out from my jump, and that could really ruin an offstage scenario in particular. Like, that's where I see this setting being just kind of bad. And also, imagine if you do know your options and you just accidentally tap your jump key. Well, next thing you know, now you accidentally used your recovery. It just, I don't know. I feel like I said, it is a very noob-friendly option, and as someone who is playing the game at a high level and already is comfortable with controls and, you know, can see their options a lot, I just find this to be something that a lot of people should probably stay away from. So prioritize neutral over side is probably the one that is most, I guess, customizable. You can play with it or you can play without it. I think it all comes down to preference, and maybe even it depends on the legend you play. Personally, ever since I turned this on, way back when I was like first starting to play the game, it instantly helped me clean up my inputs, and I was getting the nairs when I wanted to, because I used to have a really bad issue of not being able to input nairs. I think it was on like blasters in particular when I was doing like Enlight into chase dodge nair. It would just do side air every time because I would be pressing like the right or left arrow key, and it would just completely ruin the input. But with having to prioritize neutral on it, it made it so much easier. With that being said, I know there are pros that do use this. At the end of the day, this is a setting I think you should use depending on how you play and how you just feel about it in general. So getting into my controls, there is one more what I would call like noob kind of option. Jump and aim up on the same key. There are players like this. I'm pretty sure Sandstorm even uses this. Like, he has a jump and aim up key, and then he also has a separate aim up key. Like, it's really weird to me. I mean, I think for certain inputs, the logic there is that it makes it easier. For me, I've never found that to be the case. Again, it's just like the prioritize neutral over side, to where I'm just like, okay, well, why would I not have this enabled? Or in this case, why would I not have this disabled and just split my inputs? But if you find success with it and you like having it on, then, I mean, by all means use it. But for me, it helps clean up inputs, and I've never looked back on this since. Now, I'm planning on changing my keys actually, because like I talked about, if you remember, I talked about the SteelSeries GG app, where the software for the Apex Pro, which is the keyboard that a lot of Brawlhalla players are using if they are on keyboard, basically with this setup that I have right now, the actuation of the arrow keys, I can't actually change. So they're basically stuck on a much higher actuation setting than the rest of the keyboard. That's just how it's built. And I wish in the future that maybe they change that, but for the time being, it is how it is. So I've been thinking about before BCX actually changing these to keys on my keyboard. So what that would do is now I would have basically faster inputs for my movement, which would be huge. I think there's some cases where this actually does affect me and I don't even know it. But obviously, you know, changing controls can always be a very weird thing, and the best way to get used to them is just to play on it and try your best not to get frustrated. But ignoring that, for the time being, like I said, and for most of my career, I've played with the arrow keys as my movement options, no jump and aim up, and then default controls. Like, I am, I guess, an example of someone who has found success by using the default controls. I think Brawlhalla actually has pretty good controls. I understand some people like to move with WASD. I get it. But for me personally, I always liked moving with the arrow keys. It was very nice. And just having ZXCV, dodge, heavy, light, and then weapon throw, it's always felt good. I've never had any sort of hand soreness or wrist soreness or any issues with it whatsoever, aside from what I guess I mentioned where, I might change my controls. Okay, now as far as the other options, the ones that I don't use, right? Controller and mouse and keyboard. Mouse and keyboard, personally, I just don't like the idea of using mouse with this. If I remember correctly, I know that Stingray uses this. Maybe he swapped to just keyboard, but for the last I knew, Guy was also using mouse, and that would probably make him the best performing mouse and keyboard player in the game currently. And I mean, you know, that just goes to show you can find success with that sort of control setup. And for me, the logic is, it's just taking away an input device. It makes inputs less likely to be messed up. But again, there are people like Stingray. I know Izadrew he's an older Brawlhalla player. He was someone who used mouse and keyboard before, but then he ended up swapping over to keyboard. It just makes it a little easier just being able to focus on one input device. And then as far as controller, people have gone back and forth on whether controller is better or worse than keyboard. If anything holds true, I will say it seems like controller players end up going through the controllers much quicker than keyboard players go through keyboards, you know, unless you smash your keyboard or something. And that's just due to build, really, and just the wear and tear, like using the stick so much or the D-pad even. I mean, I know Crocky, that guy cycles through controllers like crazy, and even other people that I've talked to, they just go through controls like none other. So there are people at the highest level performing with controller. I'm pretty sure Acno, Godly, Luna, there's plenty of others, but those are just some examples of guys that are at the highest level of the game. And I mean, they're still able to play on what they like, which is controller. You know, they don't feel forced to go to keyboard, albeit I will say I think Godly is on keyboard now. But with that being said, at the end of the day, when it comes to controls in Brawlhalla, it really all depends on what is comfortable to you. There are some tweaks that you can make with the settings that I talked about in the video, but at the end of it, if you like controller, don't feel forced to go to keyboard unless you feel like it's maybe, you know, money-wise, it's a better investment just because you don't want to be breaking a controller every 4 or 5 months or something. But that's all I got, guys. I hope you enjoyed. I hope it helped you. And big content coming on the way with the Brawl Lock. If you guys don't know what that is, it's going to be streamed on my Twitch, and also I did make a community post, on YouTube there and on my Twitter, kind of explaining the rule set and stuff. So it would be super cool. But yeah, also Valhalla, got to get that rank. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Like I said, I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.